ইন্ডাস্ট্রির চাহিদা অনুযায়ী কয়লা সরবরাহ করতে পারে না কোল ইন্ডিয়া। এই বদনাম তার চিরকালের। বিশেষ করে উচ্চ চাহিদার সময় উপযুক্ত ও উন্নত মানের কয়লা বিদ্যুৎ উৎপাদনকারী সংস্থাগুলোকে দিতে পারে না বলেই বিদ্যুতের ঘাটতি থেকে যায়। তবে এত সব বদনামের ভাগিদার কোল ইন্ডিয়া কিন্তু একা নয়। প্রজেকশন এবং সাপ্লাইয়ের মধ্যে তারতম্য, লজিস্টিক প্রবলেম, পরিবহন ব্যবস্থার ত্রুটি প্রভৃতি একাধিক কারণ এর পিছনে দায়ী বলে মনে করছেন কোল ইন্ডিয়ার প্রাক্তন চেয়ারম্যান শশী কুমার। গ্লোবাল পাওয়ার সেক্টর ম্যাগাজিন এনার্জি অসেম্বলের এডিটোরিয়াল কোঅর্ডিনেটর ভামতী বসুর সঙ্গে আলোচনায় উঠে এলো সেই সব সমস্যার কথা।
Today we are here to address the topical issue of fuel sufficiency in the energy sector. We have with us the erstwhile chairman of CIL, Mr. Shashi Kumar. In a heavily coal-dependent economy, how serious the widening demand-supply gap could be, and what steps should be and are being taken to increase domestic coal production for long-term energy security.
As of now, the gap between the demand and supply of coal is increasing and would continue to increase for quite some time. The steps that were taken or even being taken today, one of the steps was to allocate certain coal block to the persons in private sector. Of course, there were conditions that they should have their own plants or they should have proposals for setting up their plants in the specified sectors, that is power, cement, steel and other end-use plants. Now, unfortunately, production from that endeavor did not come up as desired, and there was slippage or at least a stagnant growth in Coal India Limited for reasons which I will not go right now into detail. That led to the widening of gap. Now, once you have slipped somewhere, it takes quite some time to recover the ground, and then certain amount of recovery has already started taken place in coal sector in Coal India, the dominant player in the field. Therefore, there will be at one point certain increase in production resulting into reduction in the gap, but the demand will continue to grow more exponentially than the production grows or is forecast to grow, which will ultimately result into the widening of gap. It has been projected that about 200 billion tons of gap will be there by 16 and 17. Now, as of now, it was in the range of say 150-160 million tons.
What would be CIL's ideal strategies on coal linkages power plants?
I am no more in a position of authority in Coal India Limited, but as I have been told from sources who ought to know things, Coal India has already committed itself to giving some kind of linkages, I will explain what it is, to the power plants which are likely to be commissioned by March 2015. The concept of linkages now has little changed because it will be now the letter of assurance which has to be converted into fuel supply agreements. Conversion into fuel supply agreement will depend upon the execution of the plant and its commissioning. They have committed themselves up to March 2015. But as I feel from my own perspective, Coal India being the dominant player in the coal industry cannot summarily reject the requirement. They have to have some kind of mechanism under which at least part of the demand of the power plant is met, if not whole. Even today they are not meeting the entire requirement of power plants, and maybe later they will meet a little less than they are meeting today, but they cannot in any situation say complete no to power plant. That can't happen in this country as I see it now. I feel that the requirement of power plants up to 2015 at a level of 80% is being met. Later it may be at a lower level, but it will still be met to some extent.
A recent PMO prescription has a provision for making coal imports to fill the supply gap as worked out from the commitments made under the FSA. What should be CIL's take on that?
CIL had resisted such moves. Even the board of CIL at one point has said that we cannot have this kind of situation where we are compelled to meet the requirement of power plant without having a look at our own production capacity. But then the country needed power, requirement of power, demand of power is increasing exponentially. So finally a meeting was called in the Prime Minister's Secretariat PM office only, whereby a kind of directive was given that nothing doing, you will have to accept this. Now, since they have been somewhat forced and have reluctantly agreed to this situation, that 65% from indigenous source, 15% from import they will do. So they will be taking appropriate steps to meet that requirement. Now the problem with imports is known to only of CIL's making. Reluctance of CIL is one thing which has now been solved. They are now willing to go ahead and import as much as is required to meet that requirement. But the fact still stands out that we have several other constraints. One, you start with the availability of coal in the international market, which is very fluctuating situation and has always been so. There are various kinds of agreement under which we buy coal from them. Then there are logistics. Logistics means we do not have enough port capacity to handle a coal shipment in excess of 200 or 300 million tons, which will be the likely requirement if the power plant grow as they are, as they should. But Coal India's alone, only Coal India's production will not be able to meet that. So therefore imports will grow also accordingly. If the railway infrastructure is not put in place, its port capacities are not increased, then just asking Coal India that go ahead, you have enough money and buy coal will not solve the issue. Keep the price of newcomers in power generation at par with what the others are having, or little higher only. Now what ultimately happened, for whatever reasons, and I am not the right person to comment upon the vision of the people who decided it, but the Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs, I am believed, has said no to this proposal. How do you balance the price of import, cost of imported coal and cost of indigenous coal or the coal produced by coal companies? So there are several imbalances. A power generator who has a captive coal block will get coal at a much cheaper price, because even Coal India's prices are much higher than the cost of production, because they have various reasons to keep it higher, because of the huge manpower they have to bear, because of the very high cost of their underground mines, and because of various other legal responsibility on them which they have to discharge, and therefore their prices have to be necessarily higher than what is normally the cost of production of a mine. There is one who has got linkage and a fuel supply agreement, and thereby getting coal at a slightly higher cost, but still at a lower and affordable cost. The third player is one who will only get imported coal and will have coal at a very, very high cost. Since no balance can be struck without kind of pool pricing, which has been finally rejected and summarily rejected. So either they should be forced to take coal of all kinds, that kind of allocation should be made that they also get it, or you allow it to live like this and let the market decide. But in a situation like this, there will be lot of imbalances in availability of power and then its supply and the people paying for it. After all, the need of the country is to supply power at an affordable price. Unless you supply it at an affordable price, go on generating, nobody will buy. And the purchasing power of our citizens is not that high in any case.
And do you think international coal prices should continue to slide?
Let us understand the reason of slide in international coal prices. It's a very recent phenomenon and has not lasted very long. I don't think it will last very long. Now, why it has happened so? First is suddenly Indonesia thought of increasing its production, because that was a huge source of revenue. They had taken two steps. They had increased their prices of coal abnormally and nobody could help it. The second is that they thought that there is huge demand of coal. Let me produce large enough to increase to my revenue generation. In any case, for Indonesia, it is a huge revenue earner. The second situation obtained because of the fact that China somehow had a weak demand. This may be a temporary phase. Similarly, the production of Indonesia at certain, say, a year from now or even 6 months from now, they will feel that this is just meeting the requirement. When that situation develops, this slide will stop. In fact, I foresee that it can even improve, and it will improve.
Now, the Planning Commission member has recently said if Coal India is not able to meet the supply target as per the FSA, they must provide for coal through other means.
I said the other means should have been specified. What are the other means available? Either you produce yourself or buy it from outside. It is not going to rain. So the means should have been specified, and in the event it has not been specified, I assume that he really meant is through imports. Import can be increased only up to a certain level and not beyond that. I am afraid I may not be able to fix the level of import that is the highest at this moment, but you cannot go on increasing import. Now, therefore, Coal India would rather do better by improving its production than relying on increased quantity of import. That is not the answer.